Welcome to Real People, No Mask Required. You'll learn about real people facing real life experiences with your host, Liz Younger, licensed clinical social worker.
Hi, my name is Liz Younger, and I am a licensed clinical social worker. I have been in the field since 1988, and I want to welcome you to Real People, No Mask Required. This is a video series that I put together to talk to real people about their authentic experiences. And today, I am thrilled to introduce one of my true heroes and role models, the Executive Director of the Community Action of the Lehigh Valley, Mr. Alan Jennings. Thank you, Alan. I don't want to fangirl out on you, but I am
happy to be here. You're an old friend and a good person that does great work, and I'm happy to be here with you.
Thank you so much. So, Alan, with someone like you and your history, I guess what I will start with in our conversation right now is just when the quarantine hit. We're going to kind of start from there and kind of go back and forth a little bit. So when the quarantine first hit, I wonder about, one, your personal response to it, and then two, what your agency, who is a supporter of the underdogs, how they handled it.
Well, personally, I don't spend a lot of time dwelling on my own circumstances, my own situation. I've got, a health problem that's going to force me to retire early. I don't really work that hard on trying to deal with it. I just go about my life and make the adjustments. So, with respect, now I did quarantine. I did because Parkinson's and this virus don't go well together. So I spent about 3 months holed up in my house with my wife, poor thing, but the whole time I was still running the agency. The agency, we don't just do services, direct service kind of stuff. We're system fixers. I try to fix the system that's creating the need. I'd much rather, for example, if somebody had a job that paid their bills, than give people food assistance and make people stand in line for the shame of not being able to make it work for themselves, or I'd much rather have somebody be able to afford an apartment rather than stay in a homeless shelter.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I look at individuals' problems and put it together in the context of the broader perspective, others who have the same problem, and why and where are they, and how do we respond to that. And so one of the things that we did was we put together a consortium of nonprofits with the United Way. Really it ended up deferring to the United Way in leadership role. We get together 130 to 150 people on a Monday afternoon phone call, sharing information. What are the agencies doing to make adjustments, and how are their services being affected, and so on. And we've had consistently 130 to 150 people on those calls. We've also done some strategic stuff. Right now, we're working with a very interesting mix of people. Excuse me, trying to think through. Trying to think through what does this mean for us in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
People call it the new normal. That's a dumb name. It's mutually exclusive. You can't have normal and call it new, because normal by its definition is something that's in place long enough to be considered normal. So things like this has forced a lot of people to work at home. Their working at home has turned out to be efficient in many cases. Some corporations are saying that people's productivity has improved. And so what does that mean for commercial real estate in the Lehigh Valley?
Right.
If people don't need their offices, right?
Right.
What happens when you have a glut of commercial office space? How does that trickle down to affect the people at the lowest end of the spectrum? So that's the kind of stuff we've been doing, is everything from making sure that the system is talking to itself to looking long term at what does this mean over the years ahead. One of the clear problems has been people needing food assistance, and we run the Second Harvest Food Bank. And our record year was, every year we have a record, beating the year before.
Mm-hmm.
Last year we moved 9.4 million pounds of food. to
Wow.
200 nonprofits over a 6-county area that collectively serve 60,000 people a month.
Wow.
And we increased this year's distribution record is 11.8 million pounds, almost a 30% increase in the amount of food that we moved between last year and this year. So we've got the full gamut from direct assistance to long-range strategic thinking.
Okay. You were saying something about the pantry. No pantry went empty, right? Like that's what I was hearing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Those agencies that get their food from us, nobody has turned away anybody for lack of food in the system. And that's not happened since, when we started the Lehigh Valley Food Bank in 1982 when I was 24 years old. We've always been able to meet the demand, and that demand keeps growing and we keep stepping up. And that's a tribute to everybody in this community because it takes a lot of people to make something like that work.
So what were you observing with regards to, I don't know, reports from your staff or just your own personal observation as people started to, as the quarantine started to wear on and people were starting to lose their jobs or be laid off or furloughed or whatever word we want to use, what were you observing in the general population that you serve?
Well, that's been a tough one, Liz, because we're not seeing people as much as we used to. We were kind of shut down for a couple of weeks and are operating on minimal staff, basically by appointment. So we are not in people's homes like we normally are. The people who weatherize houses aren't going in people's homes. Those people don't want them in their homes, and our guys are scared to go in their homes. So a lot of things really slowed down. And so I don't feel like I've got a good handle on how people were dealing with this. I mean, I see people in very, very dense arrangements, where they've got a lot of people in their apartment, and their apartment is, literally a spitting distance away from the next apartment. And so they are in a natural environment that is conducive to the spread of the virus. And I see a lot of people being careful. I see a lot of people wearing their masks. But fortunately, this isn't Texas where people are stupid enough to believe that this isn't a legitimate pandemic. But I don't know enough. And there's also been a stay on evictions and foreclosures. So we're not seeing that yet. That's going to be lifted in the next few weeks. But we just don't have a good enough handle on what's happening to people.
Okay, so like as you were in your quarantine for 3 months, I don't know, like what kinds of activities were you able to do? I mean, you're stuck in your house, and I mean,
yeah, but the magic
paper?
of Zoom has enabled me to have the same number of meetings.
Oh,
I can still call people and ask them for money. I can still, text the mayor. I still have access to everybody. I still have people out there that are anxious to help, who want to give money. Our fundraising has gone through the roof. We've had just an extraordinary outpouring of support. And then the whole, civil rights explosion fed that even more.
yes.
Even more people that are saying, I don't like what I see. I want to help. And they reach out to groups that they know are intervening in the race issue. And that would be us,
Right. I was going to ask about your experience or your agency's experience with the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah, we've not officially been involved in the demonstrations, but plenty of my staff have been. I've been to probably half of those demonstrations. We go after, again, systems change, and we bug the chief of police is on my board of directors, and we've stayed in touch with him, and we can still poke at the system and move it around a little bit, even with the quarantine.
So what about your other family members? What did you observe in them as the quarantine was wearing on?
I have a daughter who has 2 sons, and she would bring them over, and we'd stand 20 feet apart, with our masks on, and it was frustrating as all get out. And we have another daughter who's got a little girl who's 3, and so she's been very protective, and rightfully so. So we've been isolated, really, even from ourselves. So we text frequently, we talk on the phone, but with the interaction, physical interaction has been limited to almost just about nothing.
Wow. Wow. And I agree. You know, when you're used to, especially such young children, of course, you want to have them on your lap or hug them or, right, or teach them how to play ball. And how that has not been able to happen until we get better answers about what our future is going to look like.
And how do you explain that to a 4-year-old? You know, I mean, you can't get too close to that little boy. You know, I mean, geez, it's a shame. I mean, it's just a terrible shame.
Yeah.
This is going to be one of those things like 9/11 was for the prior generation, and you know, Kennedy's assassination and King's assassination were our generation. It'll be
Mhm.
one of those things that you're going to have indelibly etched in your brain for the rest of your life.
Yes. So I guess, you know, one of the things you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, and I guess I want to revisit a little bit, is you mentioned about having Parkinson's. And I guess I wonder if you might just share a little bit about that experience when you were diagnosed, how that felt, and where you are now.
Well, the diagnosis is one of those things that hits you like a ton of bricks. I mean, I hate to use a cliche, but you know, I had a twitching kind of thing. No, I was having trouble typing. My left hand was seizing up, and it was hard for me to do that kind of tedious thing that requires dexterity. And I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Well, it might be MS. It might be a pinched nerve." I'm like, "MS, you know?" And so I went to a neurologist, and the neurologist said they thought that I might have Parkinson's, and you know, looked at it a little bit more and confirmed that it was indeed Parkinson's. And I just, you know, what do you do when you get that news? You know, I mean, it's like it can't be. Well, it is, and so I've had it now for 14 years. But the first thing I did was I called a friend who also had Parkinson's, and I think I told her before I told my wife, because I wanted to talk to somebody who I knew had been through it and knew what it meant and what I had to look forward to. So you just have to deal with it. I mean, it's just one of those things. You have no choice. You could take yourself out maybe, but I'm not ready to do that yet. I've come to the point where I think I'm 14 years into it. I'm doing pretty well for that stretch of time. And I mean, there are a lot of things that irritate me. You know, I would call it a big annoyance. I wouldn't call it a disability at this
Okay, that's
point.
fair. You said you called a friend. What do you think the most valuable thing that friend said to you that helped you to kind of get over, to bridge your experience from diagnosis to acceptance?
Um, I couldn't tell you. I mean, it's so much of a blur. So many different people, so many, stories, so many, I mean, the Morning Call did like a 3-page spread about my life because of that news. So everybody knew about it. I mean, people are always asking me. I find myself having to say the same thing over and over and over because everybody's very kind. They want to know how I'm doing, but I hate to say the same thing over. I say, well, I'm doing okay. It's not a disability yet. I'm managing. That kind of stuff. The medicine is critical. If I don't take it on a regular, rhythm, I end up with the symptoms being more disabling. But it's just a big pain in the ass, frankly.
I hear that. I guess, what I'm sort of hearing is you're feeling a little defined by it.
Yeah, and I had hoped not to allow that to happen, but I can't help it. I find myself like a lot of times when I talk, my head bobs a lot when I talk, and it's annoying to watch myself. And I figure it's got to be annoying to others as well. And so I find myself, saying right up front, just so you know, I have Parkinson's. The weird, behavior is because of that, and I hate that. I hate to, but I mean, I don't want people to think that I'm okay when I'm not.
No, absolutely. But I really love the idea that instead of leaving people anxious about what's really going on, you put it out there without hesitation. Like, look, this is what's going on. This is what you can expect. And,
Right.
leaving people lingering and just staring and like, should I mention anything? Should I be concerned? No, you quell that. And I think that's a stroke of genius, actually.
I'm an open book, and that's always the way I've been. And so when people tell me something's confidential, it's like, I don't know what that means. So don't tell me any secrets, Liz.
No secret. One of the things when I initially called you to ask if you would do this interview, and again, I can't tell you how grateful I am that you're doing this. You had mentioned about a little bit about how anger drives you. And also you mentioned a little bit about your childhood and how that influenced your current goals.
Yeah. Well, for starters, I was born in Hagerstown, Maryland. My family, our vacations were basically going home to aunts and uncles, and that's south of the Mason-Dixon line. And I learned some ugly things from those people. Good people, but really, not particularly, where they need to be in a modern world. But that was part of it. Part of it is my mother really pounding the golden rule into my head. And, I don't want to suffer, so I don't want you to suffer because your suffering is my suffering. So to some extent, my empathy, my sympathy comes with some degree of selfishness, because I see your suffering as mine. I almost, and I really feel your pain. And so I hate that. So I try to alleviate others' pain so I don't have to be in pain. I see so much unfairness, so much selfishness, so much greed, so much racism, so much hate that I just, I don't know how you can't be angry. The fact that if you're not pissed, you're not paying attention is the way I look at it. My father was an alcoholic. He was an embarrassing alcoholic. He died when he was 51, when I was 15. I didn't really, I was almost like a relief because I didn't have to be out embarrassed by my father being drunk. My mother was just as humble as you can get. She worked at Hess's in the patio restaurant. So we had no money. I didn't realize I was poor, but I was poor. And I went to college on all government grants and college scholarships and so on. And have dedicated my life, to taking on the side of the underdog, on the guy that's being oppressed or beaten down or left behind or marginalized. And, it's an act of selfishness because I don't want to be there either. So I'm taking you with me,
But one of the things that you've talked about is some of those experiencing, and while I appreciate what you're saying, it's like selfishness because if you don't take care of them, how are they going to take care of you kind of a thing. But the anger that you felt and how you channeled that into your current passion.
Yeah, I've been a brooder most of my life. I mean, when I was in my teens, I remember, I read the darkest books. I listened to the darkest music, Lou Reed and stuff that was just really depressing kind of stuff. And, eventually I'd go see doctors and the doctor would say, you're depressed. I'm like, I'm not depressed. And, I'd stop going to the doctor or that one, Eventually I had one of the neurologists call me, say I was depressed, gave me this 500 question MMNP or something like that.
Yeah, the MMPI.
500 true false questions. He said, I'm off the chart depressed. I said, come on, man. I said, people who are depressed can't get off the couch. I jump out of bed every morning. I race to work. I race hell all day. I come home, sleep as little as necessary because it's a waste of time, race back to work as soon as I can. I said, I'm not depressed. I'm pissed. What's the problem with that? So he said, you have something like depressive disorder or something like that. He said, there's nothing medicine can do. There's nothing I can do. The world is a better place because you're pissed. You can go.
So can I ask a quick question there? Because I think what I'm hearing is you have developed a cynicism, and that's essentially what I mean, I don't know for sure. I wasn't there. I didn't see the answers, but that they were sort of like picking up in their evaluations.
Yeah. Well, and what I say often is that I'm cynical enough to know what I'm up against, but optimistic enough to pick the fight anyway. And it's that fight that really drives me. That's what really gets me out of bed in the morning is, I wake up in the morning, I think about who I'm going to pick a fight with and then eat nails for breakfast, and then run fresh off to work, So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've got this determination that I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make the world a better place for people. And, you know, that doesn't give me any room for depression or anxiety or, I mean, I'm just barreling ahead, get the hell out of my way because I'm coming, you know, I'm coming down that road, whether you like it or not. You know?
And you don't even, I loved when you said, like, I don't have a disability, right? I'm inconvenienced right now. But again, you continue moving forward and overcoming whatever the hurdle is to keep your eye on the prize, right?
Yeah, right. And I, you know, when I let down my guard, it's usually because I've done something that's self-medicating, which I did a lot for many years. You know, I put the kind of music on that would be consistent with my mood at the time. And so I was listening to a lot of, you know, like I said, dark stuff, the Doors and the, all kinds of things that were, you know, dark. That's where I was comfortable for those moments, you know. Maybe that's depression. I just think of it as being mad at the world and needing a break for a little bit. I'm going to smoke a little pot and, you know, it's better than alcohol, you know. I mean, so, you know, I'm
So
glad it's legal.
you have a patient card?
Pardon me?
You have a patient card?
I don't. I'm a rebel. I'm a renegade. You know. In fact, I don't even want one because it feels like it's too mainstream. Like, what do you mean it's legal, man? Like when I got busted in high school, my father said, who was an alcoholic, as I said, my father said, I want to try it. I'm like, no way. You know, if you do it, then I have to quit because I was so anti-authoritarian. You know. So.
Wow, okay. Well, right, so that makes sense. You know, you're fighting systems, like, you know, they shouldn't be able to dictate the fairness in the world, or, you know, they shouldn't be able to, like, kind of, what do we call that, when they kind of broad stroke things, right? Instead of,
Yeah.
like, paying attention to individual circumstances. You get it, but you still want that humanity to come through.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of the things I guess I also wondered about is, like, I don't know, have you participated in any sort of support groups, whether as a speaker or just a participant?
Nope, I haven't. I don't pay any attention to my disease except to take the medication and ride my bicycle. I try my, you know, the medicine. If I take 25 pills a day. I take medication every 2.5 hours. And if I don't stay on that rhythm, it becomes very apparent physically. People can see it. It's a noticeable difference. And thank God for the medication. So I haven't gone to physical therapy, occupational therapy. I haven't gone for any counseling. I just, you know, plow away, you know.
Do you notice a difference? And I'm just asking because, you know, sometimes when and I get what you're saying, the anger has really forced you forward, right? It's like,
It drives,
yeah.
it drives. I mean, first of all, I'm obsessed with fairness, but you can be obsessed with fairness and do nothing about it. I am driven by my anger to bust down the barriers, kick open the doors, you know, and demand access for everybody so that it's not such a disparate world that we live in.
Yes, and of course, one of the first lessons that you taught me when I met you back in 1990, I believe I met you for the first time. But anyway, you said to me, Liz, people need to be a part of their own solutions. And I have
Well,
always carried that phrase forward in the work that I do as a mental health professional with the individuals that come into my office.
well, you know, a slogan that I use for my agency, that's not an official slogan, but I use it all the time. We don't do anything for anyone. You know, basically, we want people to learn how to solve their own problems.
Correct.
And if I do it for you, the day you leave the 6th Street shelter, you're going to face a problem. And if we haven't taught you how to fix that problem, we haven't done you any favors. So, you know, we have a very empowering approach that is essentially I can't help you if you don't want to help yourself.
Correct. They need to want it more than you.
Right.
Yes. So I guess just as examples in your own life where you have used that philosophy for yourself?
Well, it's not technology. I hate technology and I can't do it. And I'm always having to yell for somebody to come in and help me solve my problem. But everything else I've taken on I'm the kind of guy that if something's wrong, I don't accept it. I take it on. I fight back with everything I've got on every issue I can. And, I can't stand it when people complain, but do nothing about it. That's not my style. My style is complain and then go fight like hell to make it right.
One of the things I think about as part of my understanding of you is that you resist traditional strategies.
I use what traditional strategy?
You resist. Like you don't abide by traditional strategies or therapies, or right?
I have often said that I never felt the rules applied to me. I think if a rule is stupid, I'll violate it or I'll fight it. And there are so many problems out there, so many things that need to be fixed. I got a lot to do, And
how do you select?
What's that?
How do you select? How do you select your fight?
It's a very complicated question, or the answer is very complicated. It depends. It depends, A, on whether or not I think it's a bad enough problem that it demands my attention. B, are there others who would agree? C, is it solvable in the near term? D, are there opportunities that come along that shift your priority, where suddenly there's an opening and so you're going to put this one down while you take on that one? It's just a common, do I have the resources? Is it going to set me up for the next fight that I'm going to be more likely to win because we took this one on? I mean, it's just a complicated calculus there and sometimes it's just my mood or my, what I want to do that day. It's a combination of all those things and probably more.
Well, and again, I hear from you that when you run into a barrier or a boundary or whatever, a rule, you use that almost like therapy. You decide, like, I'm going to figure out how to fight this, and that's where you put your focus. Instead of focusing on, like, what's wrong. You're focusing on, like, how do I look at this so I can change it?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing that's going to get in my way. And I've often said, sometimes I pick a fight knowing I'm going to lose, but knowing that it's going to set me up for the next fight. You make an example of somebody, and everybody else that's doing that stuff is going to say, maybe I shouldn't do this anymore because that guy is pretty good at making us look bad, slum landlords, predatory lenders, politicians that don't show any sign of empathy or sympathy or decency toward their fellow, human beings. And so I take them on.
Okay, well, no, absolutely. The Simon Legrees of the world, if you will.
That's right. There's plenty.
So one of the things I thought that I heard you say is, if there's a rule, I'm going to break it, right? But you've never been, like, jailed for it, arrested, right?
No, I've tried.
Oh, how have you tried?
Yeah, there was it would take longer to tell you, but we tried to break into a building that was locked up, where a low-income woman and her 3-year-old were locked out of an illegal apartment, an apartment that was tagged unfit for human habitation. I called the landlord and said, this is who I am. You've got until tomorrow at noon to let her back into her apartment, or I'm going to break into the building. And I called the police and said, just so you know, I'm breaking into this building. You might want to come and pick me up for breaking and entering. And I called the news media and said, hey, just so you know, this is what I'm doing tomorrow at 4:00. And that appointed time came. We used a crowbar. We couldn't get the door open. So one of the people that was with me left to go get a Sawzall. And while that person was gone, somebody just happened along and said, what are you doing? I said, we're breaking into the building. He said, well, I have a key. And he unlocked the door, and that blew my opportunity to get arrested and make news out of it, you know?
Yes, yes, yes. Well, I just, again, when you're taking on, politicos or people who have influence, like how has that, I don't know, what kind of blowback do you experience?
Usually I give them a warning. I've always said I'd rather be warned than surprised.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've literally gone to bank presidents and said, look, the next time you apply for regulatory approval to put a branch in the rich white neighborhoods of suburban neighborhoods, if you haven't put a branch in South Bethlehem or downtown Allentown, I'm going to publicly oppose your application. And you will be spending money for years cleaning up after the damage we do. So, and the result has been 2 bank branches that have been located in those kinds of places. But, I said to him, look, I've given you time. I've told you for now several years, time's up. And, I consider them mostly friends, but, friendship, schmendship, what's important is justice for the people who have none. And that's what I do. And I'm proud of it.
I'm going to ask a very controversial question now, but I don't know why. I just feel like I should ask it, and it's not really related to mental health, but I still think it's important. With regards to the NIS, what is your point of view on that?
It is a brilliant strategy in a very, very tough market. And some marketplaces need effective stimulus to make them right. And downtown Allentown is as good as any example of a marketplace that needed aggressive intervention. I think Pat Brown is a brilliant legislator. He's one of my favorite legislators, even though he's a Republican and I'm a liberal Democrat. And I was on that board and was proud of the battle that I put in, because it's not perfect. We haven't seen any spillover into the neighborhoods yet, except for the charitable work that J.B. Riley has done, using the resources that he got from his development work. Mm-hmm. But all in all, I'm a huge fan of it. I just think it needs somebody to keep watch on it and make sure that the rising tide truly, for once, lifts all boats.
Okay. No, that's a great way to look at it, right? Rising tide, right. So one of the other questions I'd like to ask is, with regards to mental health, right? How do you fight for that? How do you support it?
We have people in our agency who deal with people with mental illness all the time, every day. And, we have employees who have mental health issues. I mean, mental illness is something that is, should be out of the shadows. It should be in the brightness of the day. And, this is a case where we don't really provide much in the way of services, but systems change. And I've bugged hospital CEOs. I've threatened hospital CEOs. I've embarrassed hospital CEOs. I've tried everything. We've pushed and pulled and nagged and badgered and started to make progress, and then it falls back. And it's one of those things that, it's probably the topic that I should have spent, when I look back at my career, should have spent more energy battling. It is clearly, in my opinion, along with the affordable housing problem, mm-hmm. the toughest nut to crack in our community in terms of unmet need. And I'm just hoping that someone somewhere along the way finally does put the pressure on enough, people to get it the attention it deserves.
And I guess this question is a little harder for me to ask you, because you yourself have never felt a need to get mental health support. Is that because that's what I'm sort of hearing?
Yeah, well, but I don't. My depression is, like I said, I don't even think of it as depression. I feel myself sinking sometimes, and I just fight my way out of it.
How do you do that?
I just persevere. I just stand up. I just, I stare it down. It's like grinning down a bear, like David Crockett used to do.
So you don't reach out to friends or reach out to your family? No.
I just persevere, and so it's obvious that my issue is really minimal. I don't hear voices. I don't I don't have a hard time getting up off the couch. I don't have a hard time getting motivated.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even sleep much, and I still, can drive that bulldozer, if you will. So, people have far worse problems than I do, and so it doesn't require that much to overcome, really. So
you have perspective about it.
Yeah, I think that all things considered, I'm in pretty good shape. I think, some of the greatest minds in history were people who were depressed and had mental health issues. And so I just chalk myself up to be another Vincent van Gogh or,
Michelangelo, right? He was on the spectrum.
Yeah. Art and music and culture have all been driven by people looking at things differently, if we all looked at things the same, that would be a pretty boring place, and so it's the people who are marginalized, the people who have those issues, who are often the blazer of trails. Think of all the music that came out of the counterculture of Black America, most of which was ripped off by white people. Jazz, blues, rock and roll, reggae, even hip hop. You got Eminem, you got the Beatles robbing Chuck Berry. You've got and that greatness comes out of being marginalized, being countercultural. So that kind of stuff can be a positive thing in our society to some extent.
Right, and if I'm hearing you correctly, and I love what you just said. When you talk about mental health, for many years, it has been politicized, it has been monetized, right? And instead of it just being these people don't fit with that quote unquote normal, right? And because they're outside of that, as you've already stated, they were marginalized, they were dismissed, whatever word you want to use for it. And it, much like yourself, by the way, because that's where you come in with the mental health, okay? You, instead of back in the day, there was no such thing except for getting locked in an institution for the rest of your life. So right. You needed to figure out how to rechannel your thinking. But that thinking, because it was so different, resulted in great changes.
Well, thank you. I like to think that, but I've got a lot of people. I think I'm probably the most hated person in the Lehigh Valley, frankly, because there are a lot of people who don't. They don't want to be told that they need to do more for others. They don't want to hear that, And, I'm okay with that. I've always said I want to be judged at least as much by who my enemies are as who my friends are. So, I'm okay with being hated by some, as long as I get enough people that can make a difference to join me.
Well, Alan, I do not hate you. As I said, for years I've watched from afar as you've done what I consider miracles in the community and led by example. So I can't say, and I don't want to say much more because then it just sounds, fake. But I am really, really thankful that you shared your time with me today and you gave me some insight as to what drives your passion and how you manage some of the anger, the depression, the anxiety is literally by rechanneling and trying to figure out if this is how I'm feeling, how are they feeling, what do I need to change to make this different?
Right. Thank you, Liz. You're very kind. I appreciate that very much.
But you to me are a trailblazer. So, Alan, thank you. I just can't say enough thank yous to you.
Thank you for listening to Real People, No Mask Required. Real stories, real life events, real people. For more information, visit lizyounger.com. That's lizyounger.com.